feast the week after.
I think it's the same thing.
Oh, yeah, I moved them.
Oh, okay.
One's on a Monday. I was going to be one on a
Oh
Monday,
yeah,
one on-
it's like
one
March
on a
11th.
Tuesday.
It's March 11th. The GL.
So, here's the deal. You've done your second book quiz. I will post this weekend, or at least maybe an email out to everybody who did not pass what needs to happen and what you need to do.
Yeah.
Those grades will go in grade book as they are. Excuse me. Your, staunch defender of the class, Mr. Martinko, is lobbying me hard that one of the questions is flawed and you should all get an extra point. I will have an answer for you back when I'm teaching. Whether people thought that William was crazy first or that he was doing witchcraft first.
He's crazy.
Oh, he was crazy.
He thought it was crazy.
I thought it was witchcraft.
So, but Billy's points are valid, somebody else.
It was
can bring up
witchcraft.
the issue. I will take a look at it. I mean, guys, generally speaking, just so you know, there's always the possibility that I write a question incorrectly or it's a stupid question or so. And, very rare, but it does happen. And if I notice that everybody gets it wrong, like I actually look to see how many people get each question type wrong. And if you recall when we did the midterm and I was asking you why you got them wrong, I was figuring out exactly how you were reading the question. Okay? So I do pay attention to it. I do look to see if there's flaws of my questions as well.
You're pretty fair, honest guy.
So, and if I'm wrong, I change it. I give everybody a point for it. No, so I mean, like, this happened many times last semester. You know, I noticed a question or two that could have been open for interpretation. You know, the words weren't chosen carefully, and I adjusted. So if you see something, feel free to bring it up. Like, I don't ever have a problem with it. In fact, I generally like to be proven wrong, because it means that you guys are doing your job and paying attention. You think I'm joking? I'm being serious.
A little bit.
No, I'm being dead as fuck. Like, the fact that Billy has the balls to come up to me and be like, Mr. Fox, you're stupid. And what actually happened. I'm joking.
You walked into it like, yo, you sorry, you farted in the ass.
But, actually, if you said that, I probably would have just given him the points automatically.
Patrick Mahomes, sure, asking.
But no, I mean, guys, if you can sit there and make a defense as to why a question is wrong, it means that you know the material. What's my objective as a teacher? Make sure you know material so it's a compliment if I'm wrong. Okay? Like, there's no ego in this for me. Right? I want to see you guys succeed. I want to see you guys do well. So, anyways, now I'm going to regret this because I'm trying to make sure that you guys are going to question every single fucking question.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But, at the same time, you know what happens when you make dumb statements.
You're cooked.
Okay?
You guys.
I mean, if you want to ask, like Mr. Lane, for example, about some of his comments that he made, and I ended up taping them, and then I just repeatedly play them back every class.
What'd he say?
No.
He's a voice memo.
This
Oh,
is
yeah.
618.
Oh, no.
Why is he notes yet? What did he say?
That's 618, right?
I wrote 4 paragraphs. And I wrote like a page.
Wait, run that back. Run that back.
Everyone be quiet.
They are similar because they both had a correlation to East India in some way, shape, or form.
What is the context?
Well, then I don't actually know what the context was. The next comment I made was, "You're just making all that shit up, falling out of your ass." To which he replied, "Yeah, I kinda am." I go, "I know, that's why I recorded."
And
it."
then he
There's
decided
some-
to
there's some-
and then he walked into the rules and said that again just so I can show the other classes.
I had one for Chuck earlier, but he didn't say anything for it. So, anyways, so Golden Age China, gentlemen. Okay? Let's pay attention to dates and let's look at what's happening here. Okay? The Tang Dynasty begins in 618 CE. Anyone but Adrian, what happened in 622 CE?
622 CE. Let me think.
Yes. No. Tamerlane is not born yet. Yeah,
Oh, very nice.
I don't expect you to have the right answer, so I guess it was, what? Who, what? I didn't understand the word is. Oh, Genghis. Nah, he's not playing it up. Luis.
Muhammad went from Mecca to Medina.
Yes, he did. And that is called the
The
Hijra. Not the Hajj, the Hijra. And the Hijra marks. Okay, so right around this exact same time, okay, we are seeing the rise of the Tang Dynasty and the start of the golden age of China. Okay? Now, if you remember from our maps, when we got to how far the Umayyads expanded, what borders did they get stopped at in the east?
Probably China. Probably China. Just talking about China.
They got stopped at the Indian and the Chinese borders. Why? Well, because
These
in
guys.
China, they had a strong empire that was up and could protect itself. That was the Tang. Okay, and in India they had a different one called the Gupta. Okay, empire, and then they weren't able to necessarily defeat the Byzantines, so the Byzantines were still around. So when you look at that map, the Umayyads were actually able to expand out everywhere else, but weren't able, they didn't go head to head with some of these stronger, bigger empires that were there.
Okay.
So, the Tang Dynasty lasted, for, I don't know,
A while.
what's that, 289 years?
Yeah.
Oh,
Tom or?
the Tang.
Tom,
That's 204. No, it's not.
that's like, it's two songs.
Do you want to go back to Stafford?
Two
Did you get out of Stafford yet?
Yeah.
Well, maybe film this and send a video over there.
What about Mr. Lewis?
So they lasted for a while. Eventually, they fall apart, right? Okay. There's a bit of a time period in between. This happens in a lot of empires when there's not a clear line of what succession, right? And so often happens is they got a bunch of people who fight it out, right? It's the next strongest warlord who fights it out and sees if they can consolidate power. So it took a few years. They eventually did so. And, 53 years later, we end up with the Song Dynasty.
Question, so
I figured that was why you're raising your hand, not just you want to say hi.
alright, but like, how would the Chinese decide like who would be like the next like ruler, like warlord? Was like hereditary or like fight?
If you are in power, you have the ability for it to be hereditary. If you are not in power, then there is no one to inherit the position, and you fight it out. Correct? So, this is where I'm saying that if you have a clear line of succession, then normally you follow a hereditary line, and the next person has the opportunity to demonstrate that they make a good emperor. Okay? But if there isn't, well then you got often in history at least, it will come down to like your top generals who find out. How did Constantine come to power? Well, it was a bunch of the top generals after one of the emperors got assassinated. They fought it out with bloody war, and Constantine emerged as the victor. Alright? I mean, this is pretty standard and pretty common. You'll see the exact same thing. It's actually one of the few times where you can say it works like it doesn't. Okay? It's not like democracy where we have an orderly transfer of power. Okay? A lot of times you do. Did I tell you my story about
Probably not.
British monarchy?
Can you tell the story?
Definitely.
Can you tell the story?
I was at this party in Toronto and I met.
I don't think it's
Like the guy threw to the line.
What? Yeah, like it was actually a girl and it was like,
Oh, yeah.
it was like, I don't know, they're like 300th or something. It's like ridiculous, like just out there. And they were being like snooty about it. And I was like,
I'm 319 is live.
I'm like, and well, there's also actually, there's a separate form of the British language that is only used for highborn. Nobility. So based on the schools they go to and how they pronounce their words, there's considered sort of a separate dialect for royals. And so she was speaking like this, and I'm like, do you really think Like, if you were in the top 5, I would've been like, cool.
Oh, that's
But
actually.
I'm like, at 300, I'll take your T and throw it off the boat again. Anyways, so I will also remind you guys, right, outside of America, most places that use English do not have hard vowel sounds, right? So it's not Iraq, it's Iraq, it's not Iran, it's not Tang, it's Tong.
Oh. Iodine.
It's not Oman, it's Oman.
You should tell Dr. Lin saying about these nomenclatures.
What's another one?
I forget. It was all right there. Oh, lead.
Alright, so the Tang Dynasty starts off, okay, you'll see advancements in poetry and art. We're not gonna get into it, because I think a lot of that is art. Maybe you love it, maybe you don't. But a lot of it is like pottery and calligraphy and stuff like that. I don't know, I'm not smart enough to appreciate how good calligraphy is. Yeah. What is it? Handwriting. I mean, in Asian cultures, calligraphy is actually a big thing, okay? Because you're not writing out your name, you're writing out characters, and there is an entire process for what's called the stroke order. You know, so
Whoa.
each character in Chinese has a number of strokes. Okay? Won't tell you about which one requires the most strokes. Okay?
Eric, can you just close your laptop?
He's not right there.
Eric, can you close your laptop?
Actually, Box might be here. Box might be
Derek?
I can box it on the edge.
I can see boxing on.
The Louise, you think he's under? You think he's in?
But I have platinum.
I mean, he has his green on. He has his green on.
I have platinum. Adrian, he's a platinum
He's
player.
definitely a platinum player.
God damn.
Oh my lord!
God, that big ass word.
So that's one word.
Is that a story?
How do you remember that?
So that's one word.
There are 50 strokes required to write that one word.
What is that?
That's a fucking
What does
novel.
that mean? What does that mean?
That's a stroke.
What's the whole novel? What is this? How do you say that?
Did that mean Bing Bang Noodles?
How do you say that?
Yeah.
It's one syllable?
There's actually a really famous noodle dish called Biangdang.
Let me get some.
And that's how you go about writing.
Look at it on the menu.
Is it, have you tried it before? Is it good?
Biangdang.
Is it good?
Is it good?
They are pretty good.
This is a real question. Like,
Of course he's just trying to. Imagine being a kid voting that shit.
Can you stop? You noodles or whatever it is. You have to write that shit on the paper like this.
You guys ready for actual comments?
I'd be fucked up.
Let's do attendance, so figure out who's in school Monday.
Actually, so this is. Alright, so there's a couple things. First of all, Chinese doesn't have an alphabet. Okay? Like we have 26 letters. We can mix and match the letters to make new words, correct?
Yep.
Chinese has a different character for every word, and you put combinations of characters together, and they make new words. Okay?
What about
So as an example, to graduate from Georgetown, I had to pass an oral language proficiency examination, and I did it in Chinese. And they gave me an article from a newspaper. And being that the school specialized in international affairs, the article is unfortunately on Bill Clinton's deconstructive engagement policy with China. Luckily, I knew a lot about it, even though I couldn't really read the Chinese. But to get too deconstructive, the characters that made it up had to do with like build, crop, building, you know, like, and you put them all together, and then like tear down, and you put them all together and you get deconstructive policy. So that's how crazy like the words are. Okay. At some point in the 1960s or 70s, the Chinese government accepted the fact that too many people were illiterate, and it was probably because it took too long to learn how to write the language. Okay? So what China did was they spent a good decade plus creating a simplified version of the language. Now, things like this, see this character on the outside here? Yeah. That line on the outside? Those are called radicals. They make up the base of the word. Okay? So you can organize words by radicals, and that's how you limit it.
How does punctuation work?
Of course.
So, what they did was they would keep the radical, because that's like the grouping of the words, and then they would simplify, what goes in. There are, yeah, the short part of it, there is a way that it's logically applied. So, the language in mainland China is different than what you see in Hong Kong or Taiwan. Hong Kong and Taiwan never went, accepted the simplified process. Okay? And you'll still see what are called traditional or complicated characters out there. Whereas in China, they have a much more simplified version of doing this.
So it's retarded.
Okay? What was the question?
Oh, how does punctuation work?
They have generally I don't know what they did prior. At this point, they use Western punctuation.
Oh, okay.
For it. And they moved away. And so at one point, like traditional, the old stuff is actually written top to bottom, right to left.
Yeah.
Okay? Nowadays, they actually write left to right, just like we would.
Before they used like write words like.
Yeah, they write words down. And they would write them from right to left on the page.
Those are like most Eastern countries in Asia do that, like Japan.
They all did at one point in time, and they have all moved to
And then they all
doing what they
did American.
So, I mean, Japan's even crazier, because Japan actually has, I think, 4 different language scripts. One of them is the entire Chinese character set, but then they have like 2 different alphabets.
They didn't even try to teach me. They literally just had somebody train it.
So, and then somebody asked a question about how do you text this stuff. So what you do is, you start like, there's a couple ways. If you have, like a stylus, you can write out the radical, or the basic shape of it, and, the photo recognition is so good, it just picks it right up. What a lot of the, let me back up a second. To make Chinese approachable to us Guidos, okay, white people, yeah, it's a slur, I mean, all foreigners are generally referred to as Guidos, even if you're black, but it does mean white ghost. Okay? Yeah. White ghost.
Wow,
what
thanks,
white people
Elijah.
were called because they were so
You
bad.
Wallow. Alright, bro, I get it.
No, you're just kind of called a Phaedra. You don't. Nah, it just means
I
after.
get it.
Oh, okay. Hello,
You would be too. Like, they don't distinguish.
They cancel it.
We do the same job. Doesn't mean that.
No.
What about him?
And everyone's still trying to figure him out. So, to allow for foreigners to learn the language, they created a way to Romanize the sounds. Romanize means you take a sound like ni hao ma, which is how are you in Chinese, and you figure out how to write it out so that you can read it. So ni would be N-I, hao, H-A-O, and ma would be M-A, and that's putting it into Roman letters. So it's called Romanizing it, okay? And so that's how Westerners actually learn the language, and that Romanized letters were called pinyin. P-I-N-Y-I-N, pinyin, okay? So when we learn it, we have to learn the character, the pinyin, and the English translation for every single word. Now, ironically, back to your question, is that a lot of Chinese that I saw on the subways are sitting there and typing the word in pinyin and getting the Chinese character.
So they don't know the Chinese character.
Isn't that fucking screwed up? They're using Roman letters. They're using Roman letters to write out a word because they don't have Chinese characters. So when I was there, this is a couple years ago now, I was like, oh, this is fascinating. Like, that actually now means that if China wanted to, it could actually full on move to a Romanized script.
Yeah.
Now they never will because of, the cultural bias against doing so. But the fact that I was seeing people from 15 to 25 typing it out in pinyin was like, oh, that's crazy.
That's forbidden, bro.
It's looking at what?
Wait,
Overnight pictures. Never teach them.
Yeah.
Oh, so wait, like, go back.
What?
Go back real quick. So right next to
Derek Harris, why is
Young, right? Why is that character different from the one, like the one in the bigger one, the bigger one?
What, this one?
Yeah.
That's the simplified version of it.
So that's simple? Okay, so that's what they write on the paper. You don't write that.
Wait, cuz, that's actually.
Like what?
I don't know, I'd have to look that up and see. Okay? Simple doesn't, I mean,
father?
most, a lot of the characters still have 15 strokes or whatever.
Like.
You love saying that word, don't you?
15 strokes of pencil word, man.
Yes, I do it.
Sorry, I'm just trying to help you out, Valentine's Day.
Yes, I do it.
15 strokes.
16 strokes per word.
Alright,
I got
so,
nothing.
last point or two I'm gonna make here, alright? So, not too worried about poetry and art. Confucianism, okay? We talked before when we talked about the growth and the spread of Confucianism, and we always mentioned the fact that China was a little bit strange. Because China ends up taking Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, and they end up getting mixed together in terms of practical beliefs. Here's kind of why. I'm gonna explain it in words. If you don't get it, we'll talk about it again next week. But essentially, Buddhism by itself does not necessarily, it has a way of life, a way of living, but a lot of it's focused on, hitting nirvana, how to, live a good life, meditate, and, achieve that sort of next level. It doesn't necessarily have the equivalent of, like, say, the Ten Commandments or Sharia, which is when you take out the religion out of it, what are the Ten Commandments? There are a basic set of rules that if we're gonna live together in society, we have to follow. Don't kill people. Don't sleep with your friend's wife. Don't lie, cheat, or steal. They tend to cause problems. Buddhism didn't have that aspect of it. What did have it, though, was Confucianism. Show respect to your brother, your older brother. Older brothers show respect to your parents. Parents show respect to your ancestors or your elders and your leaders. Leaders show respect to your emperor. Emperor, treat your people well. So what does it do? It provides sort of a moral code to follow. And what does it give the emperor? Yeah, it places the emperor at the top. Just like who made a deal in 800?
Charlemagne.
No.
Charlemagne and
Charlemagne and Pope.
And the Pope.
Right? Because what does every emperor want? They want legitimacy. So they want to know that they are appointed from God. And so this doesn't make it so that the emperor is appointed by God per se, but it places them at the top of this pecking order and says that everybody else should follow to him. So the emperors during the Tang Dynasty actually promoted or elevated the role of Confucianism in society.
It's like politically used
this-
religion.
I mean, whether it was a conscious decision or a subconscious decision, we have no idea. You can certainly look at the political calculation of doing so, and over time, you'll see this happen again and again. And you'll see emperors, you'll even eventually see the Chinese Communist Party do this, where they promote Confucianism, because it says you should follow us. So I will set the first makeup exam for night, starting at 7 a.m. on Monday, okay? And so if anybody wants to do it,
Oh, yeah, I
you
just
can be
start
here
my
at 7
presentation.
a.m.
Wait.
Yeah, I'm gonna start tonight.
I